I strongly believe that everything has a consequence. Every decision you make, every path you choose to take in life, there's a consequence. You always have to pay the piper, so to speak. I'm in a contemplative mood today. I really want to talk about something that has weighed on me quite a bit, specifically with the welding trade. And furthermore, when you go on into business, if you want to get into business. And there's always a conversation of should you go to college? Should you, get into the trades? And I know a lot of welding schools and stuff. I've always had a kind of a conflict with how they market it, I guess, is, oh yeah, you're going to make all this money and all these things. And well, there's a conversation of the promise, right? I believe in that promise. I've done it. I was making well over six figures by the time I was 22 years of age, in this trade. So it's there, it's possible. But what they don't talk about is what comes with it. You don't get something for nothing, so to speak. So the possibility in America, the dreams that are in America are there, but there's always a price to be paid. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. For anyone that's getting into welding just now or trying to decide if they want to get into welding, just know that there is a price to be paid, right? So for college, a good example is, there's a lot of debt up front. But once you get that debt paid off, you're doing pretty well for yourself financially. The rest of the time, you're pretty well set up by the time you go to retire. If you choose the right career choice, right? That's the dream. That's the promise. That's there. The price. Everyone knows the price about college. Everyone knows, oh, you're going to get into all this debt. And yeah, that's a lot of debt, but you'll pay it off rather quickly. You'd be surprised when you hammer on something that when you're young, it's really easy to pay off debt. A lot better than when you get married and you have kids and life really starts settling in. When you're young, that's really the best time to take on that amount of debt, if you have the right support system. Now, for welding, there's a promise of, oh, there's very little upfront costs. I think most of these welding schools, I'm a little out of touch. So what I believe is for most of the welding schools, like $15,000 for like 16 weeks or something like that. I can't quite remember. At one time I was going to start a welding school, so I knew all this stuff. But last time I checked, it was like $15,000 to get a welding school. You've heard of me, talk about unions or trade schools in the past. I'm a real strong advocate of that. On-the-job training through apprenticeship is really, I think, the best way. You couple getting trained by someone specifically in the field, so there's hands-on learning, because I think a lot of people that get in trades learn by hands-on, and then you got some in the classroom teaching that goes along with it, because there are things intellectually that you need to understand that helps you become a better tradesman. But all that being said, it's fairly cheap to get into the trade with this promise of all this money. And even the same as business is, anyone can start a business. Anyone can just start it. If you know the right things, you can just go. The promise of money, the all the things that you want in business, all the promises are there. But I really want to talk about the welding and the business side costs that no one seems to talk about a whole lot, and just make you aware that if you want to get into it, know that you're going to be willing to pay the cost. Okay. So with welding, most of what I understand, what I've been around, and I haven't been around a lot. I haven't been around as long as some guys have been around 30, 40 years in the trades. I've only been doing it for about 15 years. But from what I've seen, the biggest money in welding specifically is usually involved with traveling. And why that is because you can live somewhere where it cost of living is cheaper than the wage that you make if you boom out, if you travel. So, like I can live here in Arkansas, which is one of the cheapest cost of living in America that I understand. And then I can go to some of the northern states and make just ridiculous money. A lot of guys do it. They go up to Washington. You can even go to Alaska. There's Alaska Pipeline. That's where I used to work. And a lot of guys came from Louisiana, Arkansas, this neck of the woods, because they could go up there, work for 2 months, come home for 2 weeks, and that was their rotation. And make really good money up there, and then come down here and it was a lot cheaper. So the cost typically with making good money in welding, from what I've seen, is traveling. You got to be able to travel. Now with business, let's talk about the same thing. It's a lot easier to start out, strike out, take a chance on this. I think it's almost the same for welding, really, is when you're young is the best time to do it. Not saying it's the only time, but it is the best time, because the amount of time and effort that goes into running a business is more than just working 40. People are sold on the promise of, oh yeah, you can pull your own hours, you have all this freedom and independence. And what's funny to me, I'm kind of, like I said, I'm in a contemplative mood. What's funny is freedom is a lot less free than you think that freedom is. The more freedom you have, the more constraints you actually have to put on yourself to be able to succeed. So what I'm kind of getting at is, when you go to do business, it's going to cost a lot of weekends and nights, long hours, doing things you don't want to do, but at the cost of growing your business until you get, your book of business going and stuff like that, that most people don't see. They're like, oh yeah, you can totally pull your own hours. Yeah, but at what cost does it take for you to be able to pull your own hours and they be the hours you want, right? You can pull your own hours, but you'll find you don't really have the choice. The choice is your client's. The client chooses the hours that you pull. So yeah, you pull your own hours, but who's dictating that really is your clients. Until you get a good position where it's, running efficiently and grown large enough where you can dictate those things. It depends on what kind of business you go into for yourself, right? The main one that's the best, I would say, is probably products, because you control the flow of how many products you can sell. You control the price of them. So you regulate the flow of your work and, dispenser, how you dispense them, rather than like a service, right? Service is literally tied, the service industry is literally tied to your actual man hour, your time. So your time is being traded for money. So service industry is a little bit stickier, and that is where a lot of people end up falling, specifically with welding. When you get started out, it's kind of the mobile welding is the most efficient path to take, because you can start out with just a truck, machine, some tools, and start making money for yourself. It doesn't require a shop and overhead and bills and mortgages and all those things that come with having a shop, an actual stationary place. And so you pretty much, your business goes wherever you're needed, the service industry. So that's just mostly what I want to talk about today, is really look into what the cost is, because everything has a cost. If something sounds like it is just amazing, it's too good to be true, it's promising, you need to stop and really look at, okay, I don't have the whole picture then. If this is too good to be true, that means I don't understand the cost. What am I going to have to pay for these promises? And if you understand what you have to pay for those promises to be fulfilled, and you're willing to pay them, that's where the best things happen. That is the most beautiful place to be, is knowing what you're getting into, being willing to pay that price, and actually paying it. You'll find the promise. What really slaps people upside the head, I think, with both welding and business, is that they don't know the cost. They just see the promise and they chase that promise. And before they know it, they weren't aware of the cost, and they start paying that cost. And they're like, oh, I'm not willing to pay this. Then they realize that their desires for what they got into with welding or business will never be fulfilled, because they weren't aware of the cost, right? If you know what the cost is and you're willing to pay it right out the bat, then it won't surprise you. Instead of getting into welding, think you have all this money, and you start, find yourself 3, 4, 5 years down the road, traveling all the time, not seeing your girlfriend or your spouse, significant other of any kind. If you have kids, you don't see them as much. You're working weekends when everyone else has got weekends off. There's a myriad of things that are really a big cost, and you have to be willing to decide, is this worth it to continue on? Is it worth it? And am I heading somewhere to where that won't always be the case? And that's the other thing. You have to take intentional steps to make sure that that won't always be the case, that it's leading to something. You always want to be climbing upwards, or, moving upwards. So that's just kind of what I want to hit today. Really kind of heavier talk, I guess, than I usually get. But it is important to really have that discussion and think about it. And I think it will help you out a lot approaching life in the welding industry, the metalworking industry, fabrication industry, business. Will always be prepared for what you're going to have to pay to achieve the dream that you think that you're being promised. But other than that, you guys have a great week. I'll talk to you next week. If you've got any comments, concerns, questions, ideas, just want to say hi, throw it down in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys again. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you guys are finding this content valuable. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.